I'm going to start off by apologizing. The only thing I'll say is I actually inadvertently skipped breakfast today, so I'm also extremely hungry. I promise to make this brief and hopefully worthwhile. Full disclosure, built this narrative in mind, built this narrative with a not necessarily the most sophisticated app advertiser in mind. So if you are a gaming company who invented LTV, this might be simple, but if you're not, hopefully it'll be relevant. With that said, I'm Jonathan. I work at Google. I've been at Google for 7 years, focused on mobile the entire time. I was talking to my colleague. I thought it was interesting. The entire day, I haven't heard Google mentioned once, so I'm glad I get to say it today. And my team's focus is on helping our largest advertisers drive engagement and acquisition of their mobile app for North and South America. So I run what's called our app marketing team for the Americas. Let's get straight into it. Anyone know what this is? Vegas. I like that idea. No, it's not. It's a shopping mall. So there's a new shopping mall in town, and it's a fascinating one because it's custom specifically to you. So instead of going to the mall where some stores you like, some you don't, this mall, you like every store. This mall is curated just for you. And this mall is open 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. Everyone has been to this mall because you have it in your pocket. If you don't have a smartphone, then you don't apply. But the reason I share this story is because in our line of work, we hear a lot of big brands building apps, and honestly, in some cases, it's just for the sake of building apps. And I'm like, that's just not a good idea. But when you can build an experience that adds value for your customer, that makes their experience in their own personal mall a wonderful one. And that's what it's all about. Now, with this mall in mind, what we see and what everyone in this room sees is not all the customers are of the same value. Some will download your app and never use it. Some will download it and become the greatest users of all time and spend a fortune and so forth and so forth. And that's why this whole LTV talk is obviously so important. All things considered, not all app installs are equal. That's simple. First things first, if you are in a business that does not have a retention curve that looks like this, and instead it actually just keeps going down, honestly, you've got a lot bigger problems to worry about because your app is actually driving no LTV. So just to clarify, if your retention curve just continues and basically bottoms out at 0 after a long enough period of time, that means you are effectively not driving enough value to keep someone in your app forever. So just go back to the drawing board and build a product that people actually want to use. If it looks something like this, which the gross majority of your apps will look like, then you're in a good place because that means towards the bottom, you have a subset of core customers that have a reason to constantly engage with your app, which means you're adding some value. What I loved hearing this morning was basically no one talked about cost per install anymore as a KPI. Having been in the space for so long, because I started on app marketing with Google actually like 6.5 years ago, when forget cost per install, it was like click-through rates you were optimizing towards because there were no like SDKs. This was the only thing people optimized towards. As a gut check, if you're doing that today, full disclosure, you're doing it ineffectively. So don't optimize towards cost per install as your end metric. You can use it as a top of the funnel metric to consider for these reasons mentioned. You're going to see I'm going to kind of crank through this because I know you're as hungry as I am. And a lot of the stuff was touched on earlier today. Return on ad spend is kind of like the next logical method of evaluation. It's basically LTV in short form. So like over the next 30 days after someone installs my app, did they take a transaction or did they take an action or did they drive revenue and what was the ROI on that or return on ad spend? That's a short-term look at it. We encourage you to think long-term, which is where lifetime value comes in. One thing I've noticed, and we work with literally every one of the biggest brands on earth, is across every sector, travel, retail, banking, and everything between, everyone talks about this. Very few do a good job understanding how to track it, understanding how to evaluate it, because it's not easy. So I could say to any one of the brands here, whether you're in travel or retail, well, what's lifetime? Is that a year? Is that like 3 years do I have the customer for? Like, am I giving, after driving that install, do I see what they do after 3 years? And then do I attribute all that back to that ad click? Like that could be a stretch. Is it 6 months? Is it 3? So this will vary depending on your business, and we'll walk through a couple quick use cases. So all that to say, don't expect there to be a one-stop shop LTV model that you can deploy because it matters relevant to your customer life cycle. So how do we measure this stuff? How do I start? Obviously, you have to have tracking in place, but I'm not just talking about app tracking. Obviously, if you're an app-only business, and full disclosure, a lot of this applies to businesses that are a combination of omni-channel or pure play that have web and app. You have to have tracking and attribution in place across all of your platforms. So, of course, if someone viewed your desktop site, ended up installing your app and taking X action, can you track that? Did someone watch a video on YouTube, search for something, and then click on an ad in Words with Friends and install it? Like, if you can't track this stuff, getting to LTV is basically impossible. So just have an attribution solution in place. It doesn't have to be perfect. It should just be something where you can track these touch points. Because if not, you're shooting in the dark. And this is really what it boils down to. This is what when I meet with our partners, it's just like it's not that complicated. It does one of two things. If your app doesn't play this role, it's not adding value. It should either save you money or it should grow revenue. If it's not doing either of those, then I go back to the drawing board. All of that, of course, leading to profitability. We talked about measuring it. This is just a real simple illustration with my two blue men up there, blue man and woman, not just two blue men. Some people are worth more than others. We talked about that. These are just some examples. These are partners we work with. But this is Walmart's app. So how do they create value? They have a very cool feature called a savings catcher. If you haven't heard of that, you can literally buy something at Walmart, take a picture of the receipt, and it'll automatically crawl the web to try and find you a better price and give you the difference. If you ever want to instill confidence in your customer that you're getting a good deal, that's a pretty sweet thing to do. That's been a sensation for them. These sorts of things create value for a customer. Me as a user, I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna use this app now. I actually get benefit out of it. What is the economic value for the business? Walmart has publicly talked about how their app users spend 40% more than their non-app users. They visit the store twice as often. It reduces customer churn because loyalty improves and so forth. These are just simple examples, which I'm going to crank through. QSR is code for quick service restaurants. This is Starbucks. As you can see here, Starbucks actually processes over a quarter of every coffee purchase globally through their app. So if you ever want to see what an awesome app experience looks like, buy a coffee with the Starbucks app and you'll see what an awesome app experience looks like. So you talk about creating value. You make it easier for me as a customer. Simple. If you make it easy, you're creating value for me. And where's the value coming for Starbucks and how do they measure it? Simple things like increased revenue per store. Simple things like reduced churn reduced customer service times and wait times in store. All that helps throughput. These are pretty simple metrics. Being able to track them is admittedly not that simple, but recognizing what you want to track in the first place is step one. Telecom is huge. This is Vodafone. This is stuff that it's not straightforward at first glance, but when Vodafone customers download their app, they call their call centers less. And the reason that matters is they literally have a quantifiable dollar cost every time you call their call center because it costs them money to service that call. And in this case, 42% lower call volumes for people who have the app versus don't. So Vodafone literally can do the math on how much it's worth to me to get people to use my app because of the savings in the call centers. Finance, this is kind of a no-brainer. Not surprisingly, same rules apply for finance. When you go into a bank, it actually costs banks money to service you. So banks, as a bank visitor, that's expensive. So if they can prevent you from going to the banks more often, they can actually save money, and similarly on the call center front. And of course, there's a loyalty component. If you're using your bank's app, you're literally less likely to switch banks, and they can measure that. So these are simple examples of tracking that. Last one, media and entertainment. I don't know if any of you use the Hulu app, but statistically, if you're a Hulu customer versus a Hulu customer that also uses the app, you're going to consume more Hulu, and you're less likely to churn. You can put a value on it, measure it, see what that value is, and that's where we're starting to get going on the LTV front. This is pretty straightforward logic for what we call omni-channel customers. For those that aren't app first, you've got your app customers, your non-app customers, measure the delta between the two, while also, of course, having to take into account this notion of, well, wouldn't my most loyal customers be my app users anyway, and those are my most valuable customers? You have to account for that. So this, I know what was talked about was incrementality, but this idea of, what if I took an average customer and turned them and got them to use my app? Like, what changes then? I'm not talking about the super customer who's already going to spend a ton with you, and that person's going to download your app anyway. It's this notion of, for me, a practical example is I use Expedia. I used to book on their desktop site before I went to SBG, of course. And I used to use it. I was kind of indifferent, though. I wasn't that loyal to it until I saw a promotion if you download their app and you book with the app, you've got 3 times the amount of Expedia points. I've never, ever booked anything on travel ever again, like since then, that wasn't on that app. And I've done the math. These points really aren't worth anything to me. I mean, I travel a ton for my role. I'm like, geez, I just traveled like 45 times. I got like 2 free nights. But it's this gamification. It's that like real estate on my phone, and I just use it all the time now. You took an average customer. I wasn't a diehard Expedia customer, and you evolved me into one of those. And that's what we mean by evaluating the difference between the two and taking your consumers along that journey. What I also love is once you have an idea of indicators of what a high LTV customer looks like. So for instance, you say, you know, I know when someone uses my app this many times, takes this many actions, they are, over the course of the year, very likely to be worth this much to me. Then you can start to predict, okay, after 30 days, if they've taken this many actions, I know what they're likely going to do over the next 60 days, 90 days. And that's where the sweet spot comes in, because from a marketing standpoint, that's how you can invest more effectively, is basically being able to find users that'll maximize the amount of LTV for you. There's 3 buckets we look at. We say acquiring a net new customer. So in this example, let's say you take a Hulu. I'm not even a Hulu customer yet, but you're trying to acquire me and get me to become one through app acquisition. That's one bucket. Activating. I shop at Walmart, but I don't have the app. Getting existing customers to use the app. And then engaging. Getting existing app users to actually engage with it and get the most of it. This is simply Google's solution, something called Universal App Campaigns. It takes like 5 minutes to set up, and you run across every one of these channels automatically. This is how we drive acquisition engagement for our customers. Bias aside, it's pretty effective because it's like you set the goals, you set the targets, and it just goes to work. This is just an example. There's a lot of great partners that we've talked about today. This is just what we do. Every one of these channels is big, which helps because I know scale is an issue for a lot of people. The cool thing about Google's solution and about a lot of solutions I'm hearing other partners deploy today is we can take your data and you pass back that data to us. The app user did this, that, and this. We're like, okay, let's just go find new users like that. I'm not going to just blindly find an install for you because, as you all know in the room, installs are not of all equal value. And this is making marketing, again, coming from a world where I was doing this for 6 years, like this would have been really nice. We had this when I was first starting out. So these are your different users. Find more that spend money like that, not the ones who spend $7. When we talk about activating, there's really simple solutions for taking your existing customers who don't yet have your app and getting them to use it. And how do you message that? How do you deploy marketing campaigns against that? Because that messaging should, of course, be different than if they've never been a Star Wars customer, for instance, which was mentioned earlier before, is different if I'm actually a Star Wars customer, but I haven't used the app yet. So that messaging would be different, that experience would be different. And then engagement. If you're not segmenting, at the very least, a couple core cohorts, in this case, likely to churn, opportunity upsell, most valuable, then that's a missed opportunity. For the same reason, I don't know about you, but like the last time you got a push notification that wasn't relevant, it was just like really an unpleasant brand experience, and you're probably likely to opt out of push as a result. And fun fact, if someone opts out of push on your app, getting to opt back in, next to impossible, just a heads up. Hopefully I burned through that pretty quickly. Any questions? Pardon? We'll do it during lunch, exactly. That's a better idea. So thank you very much, appreciate it, and I'm Jonathan again. Thanks a bunch.